And you are all set to start, Michelle.
Hey, everybody. Hello on Zoom and there in the room. I am happy to be seeing you all and able to present in this kind of remote fashion. I'm hopeful that I've got a couple of teammates here that can help me navigate questions, both in the chat. Casey's going to be helping to monitor that. And Jessica, I assume if anybody there in the room with you has questions, you could give a shout out and stop me. I see that you're also on Zoom. So that would be awesome to help me field those. So my name is Michelle Thornton. For those of you who don't know me, I am an associate professor in the School of Business. I focus primarily on our MBA in healthcare, which is an online program, and that informs a lot of what my content that I'm going to be sharing with you today is, because I do teach almost exclusively in the online space. And the other kind of part of it will be informed by my work in accessibility. I was part of the first cohort of accessibility fellows and have continued to stay involved in all of our campus efforts around accessibility, both as coordinating the fellow program historically and as part of our work group on accessibility practices. So today, well, let me back up. Today's workshop is in context with a whole host of other workshops around accessibility this week and next week during the winter breakouts. So I'm going to be kind of touching on some things that are likely being talked about in some other sessions, just to make sure that we're all able to level set and start from a foundational place. But the crux of what I'm talking about and what we're going to be spending most of the time talking about today is some of the features within the Brightspace learning management system that can help you kind of make your courses more accessible in an easier way. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of screenshots from courses that I teach online and walking through kind of how to bring to life some of the principles of digital accessibility within Brightspace. So that's kind of our game plan for today. But before we get there, if you are new to accessibility, new to that world, I always like to start out with just a little bit of information that kind of gets us all on the same page. So I'm going to give me just a second. I'm going to pull up my slides and then we can be sure that everybody can see, and then we'll get started. All right. So I'm hopeful. I'm not sure that, are you guys in the room there able to see? Oh, wait, hang on. For some reason, I'm pausing. Let's see if we can.
Yep, we can see it now.
Great. All right. So let me try and go full screen one more time. For some reason, I guess, right when it goes full screen, it's not doing it. Huh. All right. Hang on one more time. We're going to try it one more time here. Okay. Let's go with that. So for starters, I've thrown around the word accessibility a couple of times, and I want to just make sure that you guys know what we're talking about. There's different ways to use that term, and for the purposes of this presentation, I think it's helpful for us to make sure that we can at least loosely define it. So for me, I think about accessibility as being sort of a philosophy or a proactive approach to designing courses and learning and just educational experiences for students. Oftentimes, even when I first started teaching, it was easy for me to get confused between something like accommodations for students with disabilities and the idea of accessibility, which is a much more universal practice. When I first saw this cartoon that I've got here up on the screen, it was really one of the most helpful ways for me to sort of distinguish between the two and to really think through about how we can use accessibility principles to ensure that we can kind of create that universal playing field for all of our students. So here, what we see in this snowy setting on the cartoon is we've got a person from facilities shoveling the stairs, and a student in a wheelchair asking like, hey, could you start with shoveling the ramp? Because certainly I could, the person in the wheelchair could access the building through the ramp. And everybody else could as well, while they then continue to shovel the stairs to open up more space, right? So having a cleared pathway on the ramp doesn't preclude students that would normally use the stairs from also using the ramp. The idea is that if we can design our courses, our learning objectives, our assignments, in this case is our digital spaces, in a way that everybody can access them, that's going to essentially improve the experience for everybody, not just our students with disabilities. The reason why this is important is because roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in 5 or 20% of Americans have a disability. And not all of those are visible, right? The student I just showed you in the wheelchair, that person you might be able to quickly identify among a crowd as someone having a disability and needing additional help or pathways cleared for them. But many of our students that have disabilities do not disclose. Oftentimes they are unfamiliar with the process of getting accommodations. They don't want the stigma attached with it, or a variety of other reasons. Perhaps the burden of proof is too high, but that doesn't distinguish the fact that they may indeed have some challenges that would benefit from having a more accessible course designed for them. So this takes the burden of proof and the burden of disclosing off the student, and instead allows us as instructors to design our coursework and our materials in a way that's absolutely kind of gives everybody access. I see in the chat that somebody is asking for the slides, and I'm happy to share those. Let me just get.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Michelle, and I can't find the file to share out. So
yeah, happy to do it. Let me just quickly grab the link.
Thank you.
And I will drop it in the chat. There's also some direct links that are in there later in the presentation, so it'll absolutely be helpful for everybody to have that. Okay. Great. Okay. So at Oswego, and you may have heard us talking about this either in previous sessions or just through our website or other spaces and trainings that you've participated in. We focus on 5 principles of digital accessibility. And today I'm going to really hone in on the first 4 of those and how they relate to Brightspace. And we'll talk a little bit about what each of them are, but essentially just know that these are sort of 4 ways to get started making your digital content more accessible for all learners that are out there. So we're going to start with structured content, and I'll tell you what that means, but we're also going to talk about hyperlinks, text equivalents for images, and some color contrast thing. Now, because I don't have time to sort of focus on each of these principles in depth, we're really just going to talk about the nuts and bolts with Brightspace. I encourage all of you to take a look at some of the existing recorded sessions on this, or any of the materials on the digital accessibility website. We've got lots and lots of information and background on some of the philosophy behind these things, but we'll be today just kind of talking about it from a more practical standpoint. But we'll begin with structured content. And essentially at the core of what structured content is it's a way to ensure that what you're presenting, say in a Word document, or in this case, I'm going to be showing you within a module in Brightspace, that the material that you're presenting is visually equal or easier to be able to follow, but perhaps even equally, if not more importantly, that if someone were to be using, for example, a screen reader or controlling through the keyboard to try and get from space to space in the content that you're providing, they have the ability to navigate that using those alternative methods. So you can imagine, and so this is one of my courses, and you can imagine a situation, I'm sure we all, if you teach online, or even if you don't, you just put materials on Brightspace for your in-person courses. The first thing that you might be doing is you're going to go to the content section and you're going to create a new module. For me, I structure my modules by each week of the course. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you here, is kind of walking you through the creation of the module and what it looks like in terms of a bad example of that from a structured content perspective. And then we'll work together to use Brightspace's tools to fix that. So the first thing I always do is add in a description of that new module, and that's where we're going to go. All right, so this, I would like to clarify at the beginning, this would be a bad example. So it's got all of the information that I would normally include, the required readings, the text for the week, what the videos are. but it's not very organized. There's nothing that sort of draws your eye to a certain order or space of how to follow along with this. You see here, there's a hyperlink that is the full written out version of that if a screen reader talked through it, they would go through all the slashes and the dots and the numbers, and it would be a mess. And of course, I don't have anything visually interesting in terms of any kind of images or anything like that. So let's see how we can at least get started with trying to make this a little bit more meeting some of the criteria of those accessibility principles. The first thing that I want to do is focus in on that structured content. And so as you can see, we've got a number of areas that need headings. And while they're just written in as regular text, there's nothing that would sort of call them out or call attention to them, either for those of us who are not visually impaired and can just see them, but also there's not anything for a screen reader to kind of grab onto as they navigate through it to move from section to section. So when you are in this description area, very simply, all you would need to do is highlight what that first heading would be. So for me, it's the required readings and resources. And then up in the top left corner right now, the drop-down box says paragraph. But if you were to click on that, it gives you the full list of the potential headings to use. Now, for me, for this section, I chose a heading 2. And not only does that then sort of bold the item, but because it's specifically chosen as a heading, that's what kind of notes it and flags it for a screen reader to be aware of. This is the better choice than me just going in and bolding it separately or increasing the font size. As I label it specifically a heading, it does both jobs, right? It addresses the fact that it will make it look more, pop out more visually, but it also then will tag it for the ability of a screen reader or a keyboard navigation system to move through it as a section heading. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions there? Okay. And, there we go. Looks great, right? So same number of clicks really had I highlighted it and then bolded it and made it larger, but instead in this way, by choosing that specific notation of the heading 2, it gets it where it needs to be for me. All right, the next thing, under the same readings and resources, I've got 2 assignments for the class this week. They have to read the introduction in chapter 1, as well as the appendix. Now, the other thing in structured content that we run into a lot is lists. And a list might be something that needs to be bulleted because there's no specific order for it, or it might be something like instructions where you want it to be numbered, where they have to do the first thing first, second thing, etc. Right now, there's nothing that sort of shows that these 2 items are related in a list as being the to-do items for the week. And to be perfectly honest, in this book, you could read them out of order. So you could read the appendix before you read chapter 1. So here I might choose bullet points. If there was some other type of set of assignments where it was important that they were in a specific order, then I would need to choose the numbering system as opposed to the bullet points. This is another one of those situations where historically I might have just gone in and put like my own, like on each line, a bullet point, or numbered on my own. But the problem with that is that, again, when we come back to these tools like screen readers or keyboard navigation, if you aren't using the actual functionality within the system, here you see my arrow pointing at the bullet point, denote kind of that official marker for it, then those external tools that help folks navigate these sites don't recognize that it's a list contained together, right? It's not a series of items that go together. And that's, I think, the important key here is that we want to make sure that it looks good. But again, if somebody is visually impaired and is relying on somebody else to tell them what's happening here, we would want them to know that this is a set of items that goes together. So in this particular case, I'm going to click on the bullet point and it gives me the options. I would like the bulleted list. Great. Looks exactly how we need. It indents it for me. Everything, is starting to kind of shape up in a way that clearly we can tell it's looking more organized. So I also called your attention to the hyperlink that I had on here. This is specifically taking my students to a video that I want them to watch, I believe. And what's important here is that, again, first of all, having that full link just didn't look great, right? You guys all get these in emails and things like that, where people have like these paragraph long hyperlinks, and it's like visually confusing and complicated. But also, so when we're thinking about a screen reader, someone using keyboard navigation, by the time they get through reading that entire hyperlink, it really is lost some of the meaning of where you're even going with it, right? And so we want someone to be able to click on or choose to click on a hyperlink that was going to take them somewhere else and have a really clear understanding of where that's going, and maybe even why. So what you instead want to do is make some amount of text that's in your description clickable, a word or phrase that then kind of behind the scenes, when they click on it, takes them to the place you want them to go. So I'm going to show you how we do that within Brightspace. So this is my Panopto lecture that I want them to get to. And the name of the lecture, right, is What is Conscious Capitalism? And in this case, I just put, kind of that full cut and paste link below that. So to rectify this situation, we need two things. One, I need to first highlight the text that I would like it to go to. So in this case, I'm going to choose the name of the lecture. And then up on top, we're going to click the chain link, which is sort of the universal system for add in a hyperlink, right? And once we do that, then the box comes up. And that's where you put that full listing or the full address, right? That you don't really want people to see, but you want them to go to. So put that under the link. The title is already highlighted, and hit create. Again, fairly straightforward in Brightspace. Most systems, whether you're using Microsoft Word or Google Doc, have this kind of mechanism where you kind of use this similar approach, find that kind of chain link, and then put in the information behind the scenes. And then when you create it, it at that point then sort of highlights, underlines in this blue colored sort of the universal symbol to let people know who can see it that this is a link that can be clicked on. But again, it also, by doing it that way, it allows a screen reader to not only navigate to it, but to alert somebody that that is a link that is taking them outside of the site. Any questions about the hyperlinks? Okay. All right. So next, we're going to talk about text equivalents for images. This one, the thing that I would say, first of all, is that while I do teach a lot online, I don't traditionally within the Brightspace or Blackboard sites use a lot of images, but there are tons of classes that do and that are really important to the coursework. So places that I typically input an image would be some sort of graph or a forecast document. In my econ classes, certainly there's some different types of data that I'm presenting that might have an image. More often than that, if I'm using a PowerPoint, say in a video, I would have a PowerPoint in a video lecture, I might have some images. So these principles apply to both of those places, but this is specifically going to show you what to do about if you're adding an image directly into the Brightspace site. So the important thing here is that you, again, if you're going to add that image, there should be a reason for it, right? Like if it's I typically am not going to add an image just to have something to be decorative or to make it look more fun or exciting. But some of you folks that may be important to you on your online sites. So, but whatever reason you're going to have an image there, you need to let individuals know who may not be able to see that image, what information you're conveying with it, right? Because otherwise, same thing. If they were to use a screen reader, it would basically, if there's not a description of what that image is, the screen reader would come up and just say blank image, right? And if there's something that you want some of your students to understand that's being conveyed with that image, then you definitely want to ensure that all of your students are getting that same level of information. So there is certainly, if you were to just have like a lovely picture, something like that, or a symbol that doesn't really have a specific meaning, you can at least note that the image is purely decorative. That is an option as well. But let's presume that there's a reason or meaning that you want to convey with that image that you're sharing. So we are in the same space, that description section on Brightspace. And for me, just for argument's sake, under the textbook, I'm going to put an image of what that book looks like, right? I guess this could convey for students to know that they've got the right book. So under our, one thing I like a lot about Brightspace is that particularly when it comes to images, it doesn't let you put one directly into the site without also adding the alternative text to it. So it's a little bit of a fail-safe here if you're going directly into the site. Not the case, right? If you're uploading additional content with images on it, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so yeah, up here we've got the picture in the top right corner that is a symbol. It looks like two mountains with the moon or the sun above it, and that is for Brightspace their insert image icon. So you would click on that, and then this is what comes up, add a file, right? So wherever you've got that stored, this was on my desktop, I believe, and we're going to find the picture that I want of the textbook image, and we're going to add that in. Immediately, the second I upload an image, it prompts me to include some alternative text or choose the fact that the image is just decorative, right? So for me, I have here the image shows the textbook cover with the name and the author. That's, I believe, what I wrote in for the description of the alternative text. Once you click OK, the image of the book appears. If you were to hover over it, or if the screen reader were to come to it, then that alternative description would be provided. So that's one of the ones I think that at least Brightspace has got your back a little bit on, because they're not going to let you sort of add any images in directly to the site without including them. Similarly, I think that their tool for checking color contrast and making sure that that there's a high enough contrast between what you put in and your background color versus your foreground versus the text are, that there is a great enough contrast for them to be able to read. Their tool for this, I think, is pretty seamless as well. So I think it's important for us to recognize that that if you're, again, an individual that wants to kind of change up colors, make it look a little more fun or creative, you just have to be cautious that you are choosing colors, that there's enough contrast so that it can be seen, particularly if somebody either has visual impairment or they're colorblind. You don't want to rely only on color in that case to show the differences between things. So for example, if you're trying to highlight a word or the name of a textbook or a concept, you don't want to solely just change the color of that to red, for example, because we know that we have some students that are not able to see reds and greens. So that wouldn't call out to them in any way. You might want to do something else like change the font or make it larger as well, in addition to just relying on color. But let's say, for argument's sake, that I wanted to get a little fancy with my design, and I want underneath the textbook image that I want to change the color of that description to match the colors that are in the textbook image, right? So if I want to do that, I would highlight the material that I want to change color. And up here, this text icon with the little paintbrush is how you would do that. So once I click on that, it allows me to choose a color. So let's say I'm choosing yellow to match the yellow textbook. It's going to tell me immediately here that the yellow in either a small or a large text on the white background fails the color contrast checker. So that is not going to be an ideal choice for me to pick in this case. So before it even lets me save this, it lets me know that this is not going to be meet the color contrast ratio standards. So let's say I choose then the contrasting color that the author's names are written in. And you'll see here that this tells me really straightforwardly that if the text is small versus large, small does not meet the ratios, but larger does. So that could be a choice that I could use as long as I increase the size of the font. So here we go. In this situation that I switched to this funky teal color, and I can double check any of these things here with this, the kind of eye on the accessibility checker that you found right below where the paintbrush was. If I click on that, this is going to tell me that it's still an error. And the reason for that is that I didn't make the text big enough. So I switched the color ratio color to one that would work. But again, it wasn't large enough at this point. So this checker would let me repair that. It tells me where my problem lies. And I can go ahead. And actually my choice was just to go back to black as opposed to switching it to the teal color. But I could have also changed and made it a larger font size, and that would have done the trick as well. Any questions about the color contrast checker? Okay. All right, so if we look at kind of like where we wound up, so you've got the section heading standing out, the bullet point of the reading expectations, the nicer look to the hyperlink for the video lecture, what we've and our image. When you kind of compare that with where we started, for again, those of us that are do not have any visual impairments, like it just visually looks more appealing, easier to follow, things jump out quicker. But what we can be assured of is that the behind the scenes versions for individuals who do, they would have the same access then to the information by using their screen readers or their keyboard navigation. And that's what's really key, right? So it improves it for those of us who don't have impairments. It definitely makes it more accessible for those that do. Essentially, I created a situation then that is much more universal and proactive in the way that I'm providing that digital content. All right. So the next thing that is a tool that I came to rely on pretty significantly when we used Blackboard, and is now integrated to a certain extent with Brightspace as well, and that is Ally. And this accessibility tool, whereas we just spent kind of a bunch of time talking about things that are when you're creating content within the site, Ally is extraordinarily helpful when you're uploading existing content to the site. So this would be things like you know, a PDF document or a Word document, slides, anything like that. It's the reality is that most of us, whether you teach online or if you don't, and you want to put your syllabus on the website or additional reading material, something like that, you're going to have other content that comes from other places that you also want to include. So Ally is the tool that works with that content that's created elsewhere. Okay. So what it does is a couple of things. One, for the instructors, it kind of gives you a measure of those externally created documents on how accessible they are and signals to you about things that you can fix in them as well. But on the second side of it, it also provides students with alternative formats for those additional content. So hold that thought. I'm going to show you it both ways so you can kind of see both from the student perspective as well as from the faculty. But the important thing for, if I let you guys take away anything here about Ally, is that I don't really get the sense that students necessarily know that this is available to them. So I also really encourage everyone to kind of understand this from the student perspective and think about perhaps changing the language in your syllabus just to call attention to this as well. So whether it's under your statement about an inclusive classroom or accessibility, anything like that, this may be something you want to call out as well. So we're going to start there. One thing I have this is from my capstone class, is I have former student examples of their capstone projects. 3 of them are PDFs and 1 is a Word document. So this is, you're looking at this at the student view right now, right? If you're going to toggle from the instructor view to the student view. And in this particular case here, what you'll see is anytime that you upload these external content formats like the PDF or the Word, there's this big A with a round circle in the middle of it and an arrow down. And that is the signal for Ally that there are alternative formats available. I didn't do anything to provide these alternative formats. Ally is built into my courses, to all of our courses in Brightspace. And so this just exists. This is there if you are uploading content. Okay, so, but your students may not know that this A with the arrow down, like is anything meaningful to them, right? So when you click on that, here's what comes up. The possibility for there to see that same content in a variety of different ways. So it could be in an MP3 for listening, which is amazing, right? Could be done in HTML so that there's easier ways to navigate it. There's a variety of different kind of the reader tools that are available. So this is an important sort of helpful hint to alert your students to that this is just there and available to them. I cannot attest to the quality of the audio and things like that across all documents, but what I would say is that if, for example, you were to upload a Word document that has structured content in it, like we've just talked about, that's where we're going to have the most success with any of these alternative audio formats, for example. Now, this is the same part of the course site, but so I'm still showing you those former student examples, but now we've switched to the faculty or just the normal instructor view that you use while you're building your site. And bad on me, because what we see here is next to that alternative download is a kind of our dashboard on how accessible each of these documents actually are. Now, I am 100% going to pass the buck and blame my students for these because they were student examples, but also I reserve the right to show you the student examples, and I didn't show you my own content. We're not going to talk about that. But the point is that we've got 3 PDFs here and a Word document that are absolutely not meeting the accessibility standards. So what this is telling you, right, is that let's say you've got a syllabus, you've got some PDFs, any of these kinds of things. This tells you where the opportunities are to resolve and make those documents more accessible. So this is kind of like a red, yellow, green kind of metric. And if we were to just look, dig a little deeper and jump into the Word document, and it's going to let us know kind of what are the spaces or the things that we could be fixing to improve the accessibility of it. So you would just click on that little, that red dial, and this is what it brings up. So the nice thing here is that it tells us what the 2 main issues are. And not surprisingly, they're things we've been talking about, right? So it tells me that there's images within this document that are missing a description. One of them here is circled. There's one of my students brought in, looks like a screenshot from an Excel document. And because it's a static image, it would need an alt text description for it. And also that this document doesn't have headings identified, right? So there up at the top, it shows that there's actually 7 images within this document that need a description, and there's no headings throughout it. So both of those things would be relatively straightforward to go in and fix. I typically, for me, I would kind of download this out, fix the issues in Word, and then re-upload it would be my approach. And then I'll get a new score and I'll see if there's anything that I missed along the way. There are some ways to fix it directly within Ally. I find it easier to fix on its own. Just a quick word about that I would say as well. I have historically in my online classes been doing a lot of that, like having Word documents that I would like download and re-upload and all of those kinds of things. I have moved for any types of separate content like that to using to Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Sheets instead. I find that having a link within the learning management system to that document makes it a little bit more straightforward for me to then use the accessibility checkers that are built into the Google suite. And then the changes get made in real time without me having to like download, re-upload, etc. But you do absolutely, that doesn't necessarily work great for something like a PDF that I showed you, or for student examples, things like that. So, so you do in some cases have to kind of play with, kind of the remediation of those documents with a download and then re-upload, things like that. Side note about PDFs, I will be highlighting a big session that we've got tomorrow focused specifically on accessibility around PDFs towards the end of today's presentation. So that's the Ally tool in a nutshell. Essentially, it's twofold, right? The student facing part of it is all about giving students alternative formats to the content that you upload. But then it is sort of like this checker for you to use that's built into Brightspace to help you highlight and identify where those areas are that need improvement. Okay. Any questions about Ally? All right. The last thing I want to just note the fact is that Brightspace in general has made a pretty big and significant commitment to accessibility. There are all kinds of resources, tools, videos, information on their site just about the basics of Brightspace. So not even just not even just your course, right? But just the student experience of using Brightspace, of how they are working to continually improve it and make it more accessible, following the WCAG principles that inform the kind of principles that we follow at Oswego as well. One of the links that I have on the resources page here takes you directly to the Brightspace's accessibility site. But I think that there are some additional kinds of things here. For example, how to magnify and zoom in on the Brightspace, those kind of pieces that, while you might not, for example, want to give students that level of detail, you may want to put a link somewhere in your syllabus or on your Brightspace page to, like, for more information about Brightspace and accessibility, and link out to this set of information as well. And so all of those will be available for you, for those of you who have that. I've also linked out to, I think, 2 of the most valuable resources that, if you are not familiar with our digital accessibility website or our accessibility fellows, these pages, give you all kinds of content around this space, but also a group of folks who are super committed to helping improve the accessibility of the learning experience at Oswego, and just folks that can kind of help you coach you through any of these issues, whether it's in Brightspace itself or, just generally if you're stuck and working on trying to make content more accessible. We've got our new cohort of fellows starting now, but I really encourage anybody who's interested in this to take a closer look, because we are always interested in more people kind of joining the fold, and whether it's participating in our work group or the possibility of the new fellows, we would love to talk with any of you about that. Last thing that I want to mention is that we do have a upcoming 2 breakout sessions tomorrow with sort of an accessibility guru. Chad Chalias is going to be on campus all day tomorrow, focusing on accessibility in Word in the morning, and then accessibility in PDFs in the afternoon. These are longer sessions. They're 3 hours each. They're meant to be working, like, kind of working sessions where you bring your own stuff to kind of actually dig into with Chad. And I highly encourage anybody to kind of participate in those, specifically if you've got stuff that's really kind of got you scratching your head a little bit. I know PDFs are tricky for a lot of folks, and I think that this is meant to be a really good session to kind of help understand that. I'm also happy to field any more questions today. I'm going to stop my share real quick now, or in the future. So, Jessica, I don't know if you guys have any questions in the room there.
No, we're all set in the room. No questions right now.
Okay. And anybody online?
Really
And
informative, Michelle. Thank you.
And everyone, I dropped the links to those 2 pages in the chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Casey. All right. Well, it was good to see all of you. Thanks so much for coming to the session today, and enjoy the rest of winter breakouts.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone.